probably around 6:05. We can jam to some music. Get
You said
people on here.
You said
6:05.
Okay.
And we'll still be on live.
Okay.
Like we are now.
Okay.
Jam to some music. Let's start.
Okay, pause the music. Oops. Good evening. My name is Jackie Floyd. I am with Russell Place of Promise. And we want to say thank you for joining us tonight on Russell Place of Promise Community Conversation on Reparations. I want to tell you a little bit about Russell Place of Promise before we get started. Russell Place of Promise is a justice-based initiative based on generating investments in the people and places that make Louisville special. To make Russell so special. Our vision of building Black wealth through investments without displacement includes sharing decision-making and leadership with residents through an innovative partnership pledge agreement written in partnership with Russell residents, connecting individuals and families to resources leading to home ownership and traditional and non-traditional business ownership, building pathways and opportunities to strengthen existing Black-owned businesses, creating innovative connections to career track jobs and community ownership of neighborhood assets. Russell Place of Promise is incubated with Cities United and the Metro government, and Community Foundation is our fiscal sponsor. And I'm gonna turn it over to Maya.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jackie. So Russell Place of Promise is a justice-based initiative, like Ms. Jackie said, focusing on generating investments in the people and places that make Russell special. Our vision is to build Black wealth without displacement and investing in those, in the Black wealth of our community. One of our principles is community learning. And so we say at RPOP, make space for innovative thinking and shared learning. And we do that through political conversations, through the summer learning series, through our programming, and through gathering with community. So our conversation today is on reparations. It's a hot topic. It has been a hot topic in the Black community for a long time. There's a long history of conversations around movements, around coalitions of people who have built this movement. And so today we're having that conversation. But before we go into the depth of the conversation with our guests, we want to share some of the things that we've learned about in research at RPOP. And one of those is the definition of reparations. What is reparations, right? There's so many programs or things or conversations happening around this topic. What is it? Reparations is a program of acknowledgement, restitution, and closure, making amends for the harm being done on victims with us a group of people, which needs attention to address and heal from the right the wrongs that have been done upon them. So acknowledgement, as we have been reading, is holding responsibility of the wrong inflicted on victims, in this case, Black folks, including an account of the damages that were done to the victims and the advantages gained from those wrongdoings. It's addressing the wrong and admitting the responsibility of the wrong that has been done to people. Redress is to right those wrongs. It's an act of restitution. Restitution is being the returning what has been lost or stolen from the victims, restoring what has been taken from them. This act of restitution can be done through communication, through negotiation between the victim and the perpetrator to come to an adequate solution of how things should be restored to those who have been stolen from or have been had a loss of resources or a loss of from their manhood, from their humanness. And then closure. Closure is an agreement from both the victims and the perpetrator that the account has been properly addressed and settled. So they come to this agreement, like a treaty, properly addressing and settling what has been acknowledged. And so in the conversation, the questions that we have for the panelists today, we will be talking about HR 40, which has been signed in April 2021 by Louisville. But what is it, right? So HR 40 is a federal bill that studies reparations itself, the public education on reparations, so the movements and the things that have been done around reparations for other folks besides Black people around the country, around the world. And how the government can apologize and compensate the descendants of the enslaved Africans within this bill. This is what's encompassed in the bill. It's also known as the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans. It was presented in 1989 by Michigan Congressman John Conyers, which you saw a picture of him a little bit earlier. And for the last 32 years, it has been on and off and just ignored and not been addressed as this bill, but is finally passed in Congress in April of 2021. Now, the commission is made of 15 members as well. The number 40, which is this a fact, was chosen by Conyers as a representation of an earlier reparations program from the general of the Civil War back in 1865. His name was General William Sherman, and he had ordered for Georgia and South Carolina free peoples to have 40 acres of land, emphasizing that 40. And then I think later on mules was added on to that program. But later in that year, President Andrew Johnson came into office after President Lincoln was assassinated, and he revoked and evicted those people from that land that was given to them. So that's where that number 40 comes from. If we go to the next slide, it just shares more about the commission of folks who are doing the examination of slavery and discrimination in the United States and in the 13 colonies before the United States was even formed as a nation. So they're looking at the discrimination and enslavement from 1619 to the present, and recommending some appropriate remedies, some things that should be addressed as we think of a reparations program, right? So the commission, the HR bill is for the Commission of Reparations, the group of people who will study it rather than the actual program of distributing those funds. So what would they identify? They will identify the role of the federal and state government in supporting the institution of slavery. They will identify the forms of discrimination that have happened on public and private sectors that have, dismantled the lives of free slaves and descendants of what they were owed. And then they're also discovering some of the lingering effects of slavery on the living African Americans in society, including Jim Crow, including mass incarceration, and including all of these things that we have to publicly educate ourselves on moving forward. Go to the next slide. And so we will share the links to all these things we have talked about today, but we want to continue to share and learn with each other. We don't know it all, us at RPOP, so we're continuously researching and learning, and that's what we're going to do in this space with our guests. But moving forward, we did put together a virtual library of where we got this information from, so we'll share that soon in the chat and in the comments. So check out our virtual library if you want to continue your education. We also have a playlist, so if you don't feel like reading anything, you want to evoke the emotion of getting what you're owed and understanding how reparations and the energy of that, we've also created a playlist on Spotify just to evoke that emotion. But other than that, you'll see those links happening in the comments soon. I will pass it on to Letitia.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Letitia Buckner, and I'm the project manager for Russell Place of Promise, and I focus on workforce and business development. Tonight, I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So Commissioner Kathleen Parks, Representative Atticus Scott, and Joshua Crowder. So Commissioner Parks, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Esteemed panelists, especially our esteemed panelist, Representative Scott. Haven't seen you in a while, but you're looking wonderful. And everyone else. And I really appreciate being a part of this panel today with all of these esteemed professionals, both young, middle-aged, and young like myself, of course. And so it's wonderful today, again, to be with you. I was selected as First Lady of Reparations for Slavery about 3 or 4 years ago due to my work with Dr. Norris Shelton, who is the author of America's Little Black Book, which I will show you. And I will talk a little bit about that later on. Behind me is the American Slave Nation flag, better known as Descendants of American Slaves. I've taught out at Bellarmine. I've taught civil rights and human rights courses out at Bellarmine University. Last year, for the first time, we created the first American Slave History Education Academy, online academy. We're going to launch the second one most likely in mid-spring of 2022. So it's truly been a journey with this reparations information, both politically, both spiritually, both socially, in terms of social justice advocacy and activist work that I've been doing most of my life over the past 30, 35 years. I currently am the president of the National Action Network. I founded the National Action Network 7 years ago. The National Action Network, as many of you all know, was founded by the national organization out of New York, was founded by the Reverend Al Sharpton, who is the journalist for Politics Nation. He also has a radio show called Keeping It Real that airs every day at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And so what I'm hoping to come out of this dialogue today, and again, I'm very excited about this dialogue, and more so excited about the Metro Council passing the resolution to support the study of HR 40. I was a little worried at first that we wouldn't get across that finish line, but Councilman Jecorey Arthur and Paula McCraney, they did their jobs. They really did the work. They put in the work, they put in the time, and they got it passed. I think it was 13, 8, and 4 were present but did not vote. But they got it across the finish line. So I'm just very excited today to be with you and discuss this topic about the American Slave Nation and also the importance of reparations and why we haven't received our reparations yet. But we are very, very close. We are closer than we've ever been in history in terms of reaching that economic battlefield. And I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you again.
Representative Scott.
Thank you so much. Much appreciation and love to the RPOP staff for the opportunity to be part of this conversation this evening. Of course, it is an honor to be engaged in the conversation with Commissioner Parks and with Mr. Crowder. And I'm looking forward to expanding on the conversation at the state and congressional level about reparations, because we do have to address this at every single level of government. There is no one body that needs to address reparations. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And Joshua?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Joshua Crowder. I'm currently a candidate for Kentucky State House in District 41. I've worked with the Sunrise Movements. I've also worked with the Charles Booker campaign, most recently, as well as earlier this year as a labor organizer. And so I'd like to thank Cities United and Russell Place of Promise for having everyone today and doing this really important work. I think with just a few seconds of critical thought, most folks can realize that the institution of slavery as it existed and the vestiges which still exist today have caused innumerable harms to countless folks in this country. And undoing that harm in every way that it has shown up is of the utmost importance if we're going to have a future where everyone is treated equally. So as I believe. So thank you for having me.
All right, thank you all. The first question is for everyone. What are reparations and what are some misconceptions about reparations? Representative Scott, would you like to go first?
Certainly. I'll start by saying that one of the misconceptions is that reparations is only about money. Yes, of course it's about money, but it's also about focusing on addressing the moral, social, and economic legacy of slavery and systemic racism. And we must understand this importance that reparations includes healing community wounds created by racial terror and historical and current trauma. It means addressing racial disparities and discrimination in housing, education, employment, etc. It means repairing and healing the wounds and righting the wrongs against folks who have been intentionally excluded throughout every aspect of our society, and making sure that we are focusing on folks who have been institutionally and systematically oppressed. And tonight we're talking about Black folks, and we know we could add to that list a whole bunch of other folks who've been intentionally, systematically, and institutionally excluded and oppressed.
Joshua, would you like to go next?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'd like to echo what Rep. Scott was saying there. Reparations is about undoing the harm that was done to the Black community in the United States. And I mean, it requires acknowledgement, one, that harm has been done, both like in the legal sense, but as well as in the realities with which we live. It requires like restitution. We see in the Black community enormous gaps in all measures of what a healthy society should be. We're talking about education, we're talking about wealth, we're talking about health, we're talking about, we're talking about living. Black people die sooner. I think some of the common misconceptions about reparations is, as echoing Rep. Scott, is that a lot of folks sometimes think or talk about reparations as only being about monetary compensation. But when we talk about reparations from an abolitionist standpoint, we don't just mean money. We mean money, yes, but we also mean land. We also mean schools that teach us and that are safe as well, that model what a healthy society should look like. We need infrastructure that is sustainable. You know what I'm saying? There's no reason that there are only a handful of exits, for example, in West Louisville, for a part of town that carries 60,000 folks traveling through the congested downtown just to get to other parts of the city. We're talking about environmental racism, considering the fact that 40% of all pollution that happens in Jefferson County comes from the West End. We're talking about we're talking about undoing the vestiges of slavery that still exist. The prison industrial complex. A quarter of all Black folks in Kentucky can't vote because of a criminal record. And that is absolutely, it's terrible. It should not be the case. There's another statistic that one of my colleagues over in DSA talks about is that at the current rate of arrests, everyone in Kentucky will be imprisoned in 100 years. And of course, Black folks are being targeted first and foremost. So these are things that also have to be addressed when we talk about reparations. That would be my answer there.
Thank you. Commissioner Parks?
Ditto to everything everyone has stated so far. And also, I would like to add that not only is reparations are not about just a stimulus check. Some people tend to think during this period of COVID that the stimulus checks that we received were a partial reparations for some of our folks. No, nothing could be farther from the truth. Reparations, number one, and most importantly, is about our birthright and our true identity and right in terms of being Americans in this country. When our African ancestors were enslaved on American soil, they immediately became the property of America. They did not see the Statue of Liberty, they saw the slave block. And they were sold into slavery, and we were raped into existence by our foreparents who were slave masters who birthed us into existence, into slavery. And for that reason, not only are we owed what the other panelists are talking about, we are owed our true identity. And I just want to digress just for a moment. And I know a lot of the terminology, such as Black, Negro, colored, people of color, minorities, so forth and so on, are used frequently throughout the media on a daily basis. And they're used so loosely and interchangeably that we don't even realize that we are being oppressed when those terminologies are being used. Let me start off by saying we are not African Americans. African Americans are immigrants that have immigrated to this country through the United States immigration system. They are certified through the immigration system. And I want to share some good news. The Census Bureau, when we all filled out our census forms in 2020, we had over 80,000 who either signed the form as an American slave or a descendant of American slave or an American descendant of slavery. Over 80,000 individuals filled out their census forms, all right, submitting their true identity and birthright in America as an American slave. Now, why is that important? In terms of reparations, when it gets to the point where we have this 15-person committee and they decide after they pull together proposals and so forth and so on as to how reparations is going to be rolled out, how that's going to be figured out. For example, we've been looking at 12 different states that would be considered for reparations. For example, Kentucky would be one of them. We're high on the list in terms of deserving reparations for our American descendants of slavery here in Louisville, Kentucky, Georgia, California, Mississippi, Tennessee, just to name a few states that would qualify for reparations. It's very important that we all be on the same page in terms of that identity piece, that birthright. And I'm going to stop there because I think we'll have time maybe to revisit that conversation. But that identity piece is number one and critical to our reparations as the American slave nation, the nation within the nation of the United States that will entitle us to to the reparations that are owed to us.
Thank you. My
You're
next
welcome.
question. My next question is, why is supporting HR 40 and the other programs of reparations so important? And what movements of reparations should we watch for or follow? Josh, if you would like to take this one first.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Letitia. Yeah, I think supporting HR 40 is important. One, because as we talked about earlier, the acknowledgement of harm done is an incredibly important part of repairing the harm done by slavery. The commission that would, that is outlined under HR 40 would create educational resources as well as investigative research on the nature of the harm done and the extent of the harm done, the true extent, the precise extent of the harm done. And ideally as well, apologies, my light just went out there. Ideally as well, identifying the systems which were built with American slavery in the ways that they have not actually disappeared, but some of them have transformed, some have altogether remained in place, as well as proposed solutions to hopefully dismantle those systems, as well as institute restitution for the victims, the descendants of the victims of the American slave trade. I think some other reparations movements that we should be paying attention to. I think the momentum that has been, the momentum that a universal basic income, for example, has gained since the time of Dr. Martin Luther King in his crusade to undo the wrongs of the American institution of slavery is incredibly important. I think Dr. King made an astute political observation that restitution for slavery requires solidarity, and some of the issues that we find obstructing our effort to repair the damage done by slavery comes from the fact that slavery was not just an institution that harmed Black people directly, but it was created as a way for the ultra wealthy then of that time to then oppress every single one of us in this country. And I think we can't separate those two realities, especially if we're going to push for real wins in the lives of Black folks today. Thank you.
Commissioner Parks?
I'll continue on the conversation regarding the formation of the American Slave Nation. We had a convention out in Los Angeles, California, just a month ago, and we formed the American Slave Nation. We have a constitution. We are forming a treaty. We are moving at the speed of light, and we are laser focused. You can find the information on Descendants of American Slaves.com. We're all over Facebook. The flag behind me is the actual American slave flag. Yes, we have a flag representing our nation within the nation of the United States of America. I am the ambassador. I am the American Slave Nation ambassador. And we are creating a treaty. Why is this important? Other groups across the country, such as the National Reparations Institute, ADOS, that's doing great work. All of these organizations really kind of got their wings from the Descendants of American Slaves movement that was founded back in 2005 by Dr. Nora Shelton, who wrote, and actually this book is the American Slave Nation Code. And just to kind of revisit history a little bit, when Harriet Tubman, when she was leading the Underground Railroad to free slaves to cross the Kentucky River, there was a code that was in the music that the slaves would sing on the plantation. There were codes in the lyrics of the songs that they were singing to let the slaves know how to get to freedom. The America's Little Black Book is a book of code. And I just want to read something just very, very quickly to you. It's chapter 38 in America's Little Black Book. It's entitled The Birth of a Nation. If there wasn't permanent mental damage done to our people during our racial incubation, and if our community of people hasn't been in this incubated, ignorant state too long, these written words should cause American slaves to break free at last. Like a newborn, we will breathe on our own. Our eyes will start opening to the realities of life. This will be the initial awakening of the American slaves nation. This was written in 2005. Fast forward, here we are in 2021. And Joshua alluded to Dr. King. Dr. King was one of the earlier leaders of the reparations movement. Prior to him being assassinated, he was about to take us to the economic battlefield, where we were going to receive our reparations and receive our rightful place in America as descendants of American slaves, the American slave nation. And so I'm just so, I'm so excited. I'm just so elated that everyone is catching on, and that, you know, our political arena, our political representatives are catching on. I'm delighted. The Representative Scott is on target. She's laser focused. Many, Ja'Cory Arthur, again, Paula McCraney, and many others across this nation are coming on board for this reparations movement, for this American slave nation. And we will be accepting citizens in this nation by the first of the year, 2022. And so for more information about that, hit me up on Facebook or email me or whatever. If you'd like to have our flag, I can show you how to get the flag, get our books. And also there is a document on how to create business incubators in the community. However, Russell is doing one heck of a job in terms of recreating and lifting up Russell as a positive model for reparations and restorative justice in America. And I'm very, very excited about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative Scott.
Yes, certainly. So what I will add to this conversation about supporting HR 40 is to give a shout out and some love to Congresswoman Jackson Lee, who became the sponsor this year after Representative Conyers passed away. And, you know, I was a little bit concerned at first because I know that government has a bad habit of establishing commissions that study to death. But what I'm seeing from this particular commission, which we know is to study and develop reparations proposals for Black folks, is that it really is designed to examine slavery and discrimination in what is now the United States from colonization in 1619 to today. And so the fact that it will recommend remedies for the kidnapping and human trafficking and bondage of Black folks is important for us to recognize, and to reiterate the three key components of the commission, which is being honest and direct about the role of the federal and state governments in supporting and benefiting from, profiting off of the institution of slavery. And then, of course, to look at the forms of discrimination in public and private sectors against freed slaves and their descendants. And then, of course, addressing what we've talked about already, the lingering negative effects, which I'm not sure what the positive effects of slavery would be on living Black folks and our society. So what we're going to start seeing is people mobilizing folks for action, organizing around reparations at every level. Of course, getting involved in, continuing to be involved and deepening their involvement in the political process through registering people to vote, running for office themselves, holding candidate forums, educating folks on what reparations is and what HR 40 is and what it is designed to do, and of course, following the next steps. And so this is going to be at every level, whether it's cities and states passing reparations legislation, or it's people following closely the next steps with the commission that was created by HR 40. So in this next year, 2022, we're going to see a lot more movement around reparations, and we're going to continue to hear the conversation amplified across the country.
Thank you. Our next question is for Representative Scott and Josh. How would reparations work on a legislative level, and how should the descendants of African people or those who are self-identify as Black be included in the legislation?
So I'm going to be honest, we'll probably see a commission like the Commission on Race that was passed this previous legislative session, created to, again, keep studying us as Black folks. I'm sadly not convinced that there will be more than study done rather than real actual action, unless we the people push. And we the people have got to step up and push harder on Frankfurt if we really want to see some movement at the state level on reparations. And one thing that I'm clear about, though, is that legislation must be created in partnership with the people most directly impacted. In the words of Congresswoman Presley, people closest to the pain should be closest to the power, driving and informing policy making. I know Josh referenced Universal Basic Income, UBI. I worked in partnership with Russell Place of Promise on the UBI bill that we were able to file a few weeks ago, because the legislation has to be driven by the people. And that's exactly what we were doing. So whatever happens at the state level as it relates to reparations has to be driven by we the people. It can't be driven by legislators who think they know what's best or who want to water down our efforts. It has to be pushed. And so I'm calling folks to action to push. If you want to see reparations in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, then you got to challenge and confront your legislator and ask them where they stand on reparations.
Yeah, thank you, Rep. Scott. And to add what Rep. Scott was saying, I think she's exactly right. Power concedes nothing without demand. And in order to really have a vision of what reparations could look like legislatively, we have to first envision what a movement for reparations would look like when the people are organizing around it. And so, as I mentioned before, solidarity is incredibly important, as well as education about what reparations is, about what the purpose is, about the context, both historical and present, about the need for reparations, specifically around the systems that specifically, that exist and persist today, that continue to harm Black folks in this country and continue to extract wealth year after year after year. I think it's incredibly important as well to imagine reparations legislation as not being a simple, but rather complex and comprehensive. Cash payments are absolutely a necessary aspect of it, right? Because people need wealth, people need a basic standard of living, right? But as well, like Commissioner Parks mentioned earlier, when we got our stimulus checks earlier this year, they went straight to the bills, and then the system still persists, And if we get a monthly just checks, they're just going to go straight to the bills. They're just going to go straight to the landlord. They're going to go straight to the power company. They're going to go straight to the auto dealership. So we need to imagine that reparations legislation is going to be so much more comprehensive than I think people really understand it to be. We're talking, again, like education. We're going to need more schools. For example, in the West End, there's no reason that there are only 4 active neighborhood schools in the West End of Louisville. Reparations means building more schools for Black communities so that Black children can learn about their history, can learn about the society that they live in today, to learn how to imagine new societies, because old structures don't last. We're talking about legislation to attack the heart of the climate crisis. We realize that Black communities are on the forefront of devastating effects of climate change, from 60% of the west in the Louisville being within FEMA's new flood zone, from the new flood zone maps that were launched recently. 100-year flood, like the one that happened less than 100 years ago in Louisville, would damage or destroy almost half of everything owned in the West End. And with worsening climate change, we're seeing floods like that happen more and more frequently, and we are not prepared to deal with it. We need to see legislation that expressly deals with the prison industrial complex, talking about the fact that 70% of everyone in jail has never been convicted of a crime, and an outsized portion of those folks are Black and are being deliberately imprisoned for nothing more than to provide wealth for private prison contractors, as well as through structures like civil asset forfeiture, wealth directly to police departments. And so these are all things that I think legislation, reparations legislation would have to look like, which means that, if we're going to attack this thing comprehensively, we're going to need to have mass action from a united working force. Working folks from all across this country are going to need to be organized in support of legislation like this, because it will touch everything, literally everything in our society. So thank you.
Thank you. And speaking about money, where is the funding going to come from for reparations? Commissioner Parks, would you like to take this one? Where's the money going to come from?
Well, ultimately, the United States government of America is going to take the lead on that, because ultimately they owe us. And of course, corporations, insurance companies, banks, they all benefited off the backs of free labor of American slaves. American slavery was a business, big business. And very often we have to take the emotion out of the conversation. Yes, we were raped into existence, no doubt about it. And as human beings, it's very difficult to really look at that, look at the past and the horrific scars that all of us have dealt with in terms of the post-traumatic slave syndrome that all of us have in America. And we are still discovering who we are. Many of us still want to be, as I stated, and I keep hammering this home, because that identity piece is going to be critical when the reparations money does roll out, and all of these programs and legislations that are going to be passed are going to have to be passed by leaders that are educated. And so we have 104 HBCUs in this nation. Each one of those HBCUs needs to have a programs that teach about the American slave historical culture. Every public school system, every private school system, the archdiocese across this country also were leaders in the slavery commerce business. It was big business in this country to own slaves, to have slaves. And reparations were paid to slaveholders. They received $300 each for each slave that was freed during the emancipation, and $100 for slaves that decided that they wanted to immigrate. And so it's a very, very complex subject, reparations. Again, the identity piece. First of all, we've got to start with, who are we? Who are we? And when I ask that question in my classes, many cannot answer that question. Some say I'm Black. Some say I am a person of color. I'm a minority. It's very confusing. And those terminologies, those political terminologies are going to have to be eliminated in the political jargon of legislation, or we're going to get hoodwinked again for the next 400 years. They will find a way out of giving us, of paying us the reparations that are owed to us in America. So we've got to start with that identity piece. It's very, very critical. Black is a color, not a nationality. People of color encompass Latinos, people of Indian descent, people of Mexican descent. When you talk about people of color, that's a broad array. When you talk about minorities, what are you talking about? Are you talking about descendants of American slaves? I doubt it. So it's very, very confusing. So education is a very, very critical piece in there for our legislators, the ones that we elect to public office. They have to understand. The President of the United States does not understand who we are. Neither does the Vice President, all right? And many of us, I just discovered who I really was 4 years ago through my own research and development. And so we've got to start there. If we are confused about who we are, how do you think our children are? That's why we have the gun violence. That's why we have the police brutality. All of these things are after effects of slavery that have never been resolved because our education system has failed us. The miseducation of the Negro still prevails today. And in 1989, God rest his soul, Congressman John Conyers, he did not fully understand the identity piece. So we are continuing to evolve as a nation of people within a nation of the United States of America. Yes, we can agree that we need more education, that we need infrastructure, that we need all these things to build our communities. But we need to be very, very specific. And it is nothing wrong with us saying we need business incubators specifically for descendants of American slaves. Where we get hoodwinked is when we start talking about minorities, people of color, Black, because when you talk about Black, once again, you're going down that road of a complex definition designed to be that way to exclude you from receiving your true economic reparations and your economic justice that you deserve. Voting rights right now is number one. I was looking at the Secretary of State website today, and I noticed that our Secretary of State has been doing an abundant job of cleaning the voter rolls. When they start talking about cleaning the voter registry, you know who's being cleaned, us. And so there's a lot of things. And then again, the abortion question. You're talking about elimination of descendants of American slaves, women's liberty rights. So a lot of things are falling through the cracks here, simultaneously, while we are being unaware on a day-to-day basis with these terminologies floating all around: Black, minority, colored, Negro, and of course with the hip hop word, and you all already know what that is. And so we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. But ultimately, to answer the question, the United States government is ultimately responsible for making sure that descendants of American slaves, the American slave nations, receive their rightful place in America and their reparations. I just want to say one more thing and I'm going to close. Jews received their reparations for the Holocaust. The Japanese received their reparations. Native Americans received their reparations. The Black Aborigines from Australia got a national apology. Every May 26th is National Apology Day in Australia, but no reparations, no monetary reparations, no relief. And again, the slave owners in the United States received their reparations. We are the only cultural group, human race, born and bred on American soil who have not received our reparations. And any person on this planet, on this earth, who does not recognize the importance of our human identity, we're in trouble. So we've all got to work together on that identity piece. I mean, we can have different ways of reaching that destination, but in order for us to get there and really get those reparations that are due to us, we've got to agree on that.
Thank you, Kathleen, for your insightful comments. I think we want to keep our answers down to like 2 minutes because we want to get questions in from Facebook, and we really appreciate your insightful comments. But we do have questions in the chat. Letitia?
Okay, our first question in the chat is, what responsibility does the city of Louisville play in reparations for city policies which hindered Black wealth, urban renewal policies that destroyed Walnut Street and Black home ownership, redlining policies? Let's see. So yeah, so the question is, what role or what responsibility did the city of Louisville play in reparations in terms of policy?
And I'm going to have to go in just a minute. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to participate. I will add to that question by saying that if you read Ta-Nehisi Coates' case for reparations, he lays out the responsibility of public and private sectors in funding reparations. I mean, listen, we've seen movements with Rosewood, Tulsa, right here in Fulton County, Kentucky. David Walker lynched in 1908, and people still looking for reparations for his descendants. Yes, of course, the city of Louisville is responsible because it is a public sector. And so we can look at what the city can do. Yes, the city can be part of the movement to decriminalize and legalize marijuana and use the profits collected for a reparations fund. And that's money that will go right back into our communities. We have to think creatively, and we have to make sure that whatever we do benefits the people who've been hurt and harmed by history, by slavery, and that includes the descendants of people who were enslaved. So thank you all again so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Scott. We appreciate it.
I have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. Governor Newsom out in California, he returned Bruce Beach to the heirs of Charles and Willa Bruce. And what the newspapers are calling, they're saying this is a reparations milestone. What are your feelings on that, Commissioner Parks and Josh?
Sure, if I can respond. You know, my initial reaction are one, good. You know, one of the core aspects of reparations is the restitution aspect for the harm that was caused by slavery, the enslavement of Black folks in the United States of America. And, you know, and to add to that, I think as well, I think it's an easy way for Governor Newsom to not do more, to say that, you know, we've solved reparations by giving this estate back to this one family. Yet he has allowed laws which ban homeless Black folks from camping in the streets, instead of throwing them into prisons. So I push back on the very telescopic focus on the piecemeal aspects of repairing the harm done by slavery to Black Americans. Again, to add to what Commissioner Parks was saying earlier, an important aspect of repairing the harm done is to recognize the victims as human beings, is to humanize us. And so much of the institution of slavery and the vestiges of the institutions of slavery that still exist today exist to, first and foremost, dehumanize us in all kinds of ways, to deny us of our personal liberties, through abortion rights, as we see, to deny us of our education, as we see in West Louisville, to deny us of our personal agency by criminalizing us and incarcerating us when we instead need doctors, um, by directly harming us through environmental racism and through medical racism. And so I think what Gavin Newsom is doing is a start, but it's not far enough.
Thank you, Josh. Commissioner Parks?
Ditto to what Brother Joshua has stated, and I apologize for my long-windedness. I tend to be very passionate about the subject of the American slave nation as a culture, and also the identity piece. However, I feel like what is happening, actually, I don't feel, I know, many of the legislators and government officials piecemeal things because they really don't know what to do. They don't understand what to do. We as a people don't totally understand what to do because we still suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome. And if I could just say a little bit about self-healing, self-care is so important. And that would be a great topic for Russell to take up as well. I just simply don't have the time to have self-healing workshops and those kinds of things. But the self-healing piece is so important. And even the political legislators need to go through the self-healing workshops to understand that first we are human. And so you just can't politically piecemeal us through and put a rubber stamp on something and think, okay, we're going to give you $25,000 for housing, or we're going to repay what was taken from you, like in the Tulsa. They can never fully repay those families the loss of what happened. And they can never fully repay us for what happened to our ancestors during slavery. But what they can do is listen to us as a human race. We are human. We are human beings. And they can certainly listen. All of us can listen to each other, you know, as we move down this path of reparations, because I believe in my heart and in my spirit that we truly will receive our reparations, but we have to tell them what it looks like.
Mhm.
And we have to demand of them what it should be.
I have another question in the chat. Commissioner Parks, you had mentioned this earlier about educating our children as well as
Yes, ma'am.
adults. Do you think we should leave it to the educational system to educate our children in light of today's environment? How would you educate our children?
I am a retired public school teacher myself.
Mhm.
I taught in Jefferson County, I've taught in the Catholic school system, and I also taught in the Georgia state system.
Mhm.
And before any teacher can adequately teach any type of reparations history or any type of American slave, in any information relative to the American slave culture, they would need to go through a college or university program or a specialized program to study very closely the history of slavery in America, what that really looked like. Okay, because I know when I was in school and also when I taught, the only curriculum that they gave us to teach about every year, Martin Luther King Day, and they taught that Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, freed the slave. I mean, nothing has changed. The curriculum is the same.
Mhm.
And again, the tricks with the critical race theory is that you're not just focusing on descendants of American slaves, you're focusing on a whole menu
Mhm.
of racial disparity subjects. So again, I'm not against critical race theory. I think it should be taught. But I think people need to understand, again, that you run into that minority trick,
Mhm.
okay? And then very often we get caught at the bottom.
Mhm.
We get caught at the bottom of the system and our children lose. So I guess the answer to that question to me is no.
Okay. Josh.
And thank you so much, Commissioner Parks, for your comments. Ms. Jackie, if you wouldn't mind posting the questions in the chat when they come up, just so that I can refer to them before. But the question, I believe, was how do we educate folks? How do we educate our children? Right. I grew up in a Montessori school. John F. Kennedy Montessori Elementary School. Over there next to the Watterson in the West at Louisville. And something that I learned from my time in Montessori school is the importance of developing a critical consciousness, which is a way of teaching children how to be investigative and how to be aware, critically aware of the societies that they live in and the systems that make it up, as well as the trends of beliefs of different sects of folks in the society, and how all of those things relate together. I think at the end of the day, like if we're going to be able to critically address the harm done by the enslavement of Black folks in the United States, we are going to need folks who are critically aware of the society that we live in and the effects that slavery has had on our society. And that critical awareness doesn't necessarily just come from, echoing what Ms. Parks says, telling folks on Martin Luther King Day, this is what happened, and then this is what happened, and then leaving it there. I think part of educating our children around reparations, as well as around the true extent to the harm done by slavery in the United States, is going to require educating our children on how to be critical, and how to visionarily imagine what a world beyond the world that we live in could potentially look like, as well as equip them with the tools to be able to build it. So as well, like everything else, I think we should be educating our kids comprehensively within specifically an abolitionist framework, that is to abolish the systems that exist today because of institutional slavery in the United States. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One last question. And Josh, you're asking me to do things beyond my technical ability, okay? Okay, so tell you that. I have heard, and this is my question, okay? I have heard other people in other races have said that basically it was not their responsibility to do reparations because they were not alive. No one's alive today that was when doing the slavery. And then bottom line, they have given us Barack Obama, our first Black president. So how would you all respond to that? You one of y'all could go first.
That's the biggest hoodwink ever. That would be the first response I would give. As I had mentioned earlier, the United States has been paying reparations to its citizens forever. The Jews received their reparations, the Japanese, Native Americans have received their reparations. Many reparations payments have been paid to people of ethnicity. And I would counter that question with, all right, if all these other cultures have received reparations, why do you not feel that it would be necessary for the United States to pay reparations to its descendants of slaves? This country would not be here if it wasn't for the work and the free labor of slaves. That chair that you're sitting on, that desk that you sit on every day on your job, the cars that you ride in, the roads and the bridges that you travel on a day-to-day basis, the planes that were built, everything that has been built in America were built on the backs of slaves. And I would also follow up, how would you feel if you were not paid for the labor of something that you did? Would it be okay? And so again, education really is the key. Our faith-based organizations, our churches, organizations like Cities United and other organizations, we're all just going to have to come together, pull together and educate the masses. Our 104 HBCUs all need to produce graduates of American slave cultural programs, just like they have Pan-African history programs. We need to have reparations programs. Pan-African studies is very different. This is so new. Reparations information, the American slave culture, ADOS, descendants of American slaves. This is very, very new educational information that's just being launched out there in the American mainstream. And it's very, first of all, you have to get past the pain of it. That's where the self-care comes in. And then secondly, we have to have qualified educators and professors and politicians that can deliver the correct information to the public. But you've got a good start here today. And I'm confident that we're all going to move together. And I'm confident that we're going to see reparations very, 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 very soon.
Yeah, Ms. Jackie, I think you're muted.
You're
but,
muted.
I think Ms. Jackie, you're muted. Yeah.
I told you I was not computer literate, okay? I'm still struggling with that, okay?
You're doing fine.
Thank you. Josh, I'm gonna give you this question and you've got a total of 2 minutes to answer this, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think as the election is approaching, do you think that should be one of the questions that we should ask officials, people that are running for elected office, whether it's on the local level, the state level, or the federal level, about reparations and how they feel about that and can they support it?
Well, absolutely, yes. Because I think fundamentally the question is one that asks, do you support or are you with dismantling the systems that still persist today because of the institution of slavery, right? I think that if an elected official can look his constituents or her constituents or their constituents in the face and say, no, I think it's fine that Black folks continue to be arrested for no reason at all and made to be forced to work as slaves today. And I think someone like that should not be in elected office. I think anyone who goes into the General Assembly should be able to commit to dismantling the systems of oppression that exist in this country. And I think we find a lot of skittishness among our elected officials regarding making true systemic change, because a lot of our elected representatives are not accountable to the people. They are accountable to money. There was a landmark piece of research done by I think it was done by the Pew Research Center that showed that the collective agreement on a piece of policy or a piece of legislation accounts for only 30% of whether or not that piece of legislation gets passed in the law. So I think the question is fundamental, of course, to anyone who wants to hold elected office.
Thank you so much. We're getting ready to wrap it up. I want to say thank you so much, Josh and Commissioner Parks, on being a part of the panel tonight. Before I turn it over to Maya, I just want to, I'm gonna give you 90 seconds to give me your thoughts, reflections, or points about tonight's conversation. Okay, I'll stretch it to 2 minutes, okay? Okay, 2 minutes. Which one do you want to go first? Kathleen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the disrespect. Commissioner Parks, would you like to go first?
No respect. I really appreciate serving on this panel. It's a great, I would say, really, it's a great step forward in terms of Louisville, Kentucky, the city that I was born in, moving toward reparations, moving toward the healing that our people need, and the enlightenment and acknowledgement of who we are in America and how, and the deservingness of all of us, because we are paving the way for our children's futures. We must do this. And so again, I want to reach out to all the faith-based organizations, politicians and the like. We have been having sessions with the candidates that have been running for mayor. So we got a pretty good idea and concept of where people are on reparations. And I've said publicly, any politician, anyone that's running for any type of seat, whether it be congressional, senatorial, local, or whatever, if they don't have reparations on the center, number one on their platform, they will not get my vote. And so it's just as simple as that. And they shouldn't get any of our votes. We've been hoodwinked long enough. Enough is enough. And we must hold our politicians and our public officials and our faith-based leaders, our educators, everyone in our city, in our state, in our country accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kathleen. Josh, 2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Commissioner Parks, for your participation on the panel. Thank you so much to Cities United and Russell Place of Promise for holding this panel. And I hope to see more and more informational sessions and conversations about what repairing the harm done by institutional slavery could and should look like in our community. Thoughts about tonight? I think the conversations tonight raised some incredibly important points about what reparations is, about how we can potentially achieve a more just society than we live in currently, as well as examples of where other governments around the world have made attempts to repair the harm done to communities in those aspects, and I'll speak on that just very briefly by adding that, we absolutely need solidarity if we are going to have wins. We examine the reparations that were paid in piecemeal to Indigenous Americans, but we saw our first Indigenous member of the Cabinet of the United States Executive Office just last year, as well as considering the fact that the COVID-19 crisis, due to medical racism within our Indigenous communities, has absolutely devastated Indigenous communities because the reparations that were paid to them were not reparative. We see as well like wealth gaps between Japanese Americans and white Americans in the United States because the reparations paid to them because of the internment camps during World War II were not fully restituted. As well, like Jewish folks in the United States and around the world still suffer all manners of oppression. Especially like Jewish folks who live in Palestine, who are being killed daily with weapons manufactured in the United States. We recognize that like oppressed people all over the world, even those who have received some manners of restorative payments or restorative action or acknowledgement, are still subject to oppression daily, especially Black folks in the United States. And I think the only way forward is to unite all oppressed folks, all working people in solidarity for justice for all of us, because there cannot be justice if there is injustice amongst any of us. So thank you.
Once again, thank you, Josh Crowder, Commissioner Parks, for being a part, and Representative Scott for being a part of Russell Place of Promise Community Conversations on Reparations. And now I will turn it over to Maya.
Thank you, Ms. Jackie. Such a fruitful conversation that we had tonight. Just collecting from what we've heard from our guests, we talked about community and resident-driven efforts, as Representative Scott was talking about the UBI bills, pushed on solidarity, which Josh had talked about earlier, but he brought back into the circle. Also, Commissioner Colleen Parks talking about learning together, creating a cohesive voice and understanding who we are as a people, understanding who we are to go forward. Another powerful quote that Josh had mentioned was, "Power concedes nothing without demand." And I think that really ties in well with the partnership pledge, the Russell Partnership Pledge that you've probably seen on our pages or probably heard us talking about in public. The Partnership Pledge is an opportunity for us to have that cohesive voice, that collective understanding of what Russell residents can look forward to as we're thinking about future developments, future investments in our community. And as we continue to learn about reparations, especially in this shared learning environment, this classroom that we're in, it's just one way for us to continue to involve and engage with the community of Russell, and also with RPOP. The work that we're doing, we're generating investments without displacement. We're building Black wealth. We're having shared learning experiences, and the Partnership Pledge is a tool we use as a guide to create these parameters of how we do investments differently, how we're doing future engagements, strategies, policy and advocacy, and community involvement with Russell residents at the center of it, right? The document has everything from a definition of Black wealth to power sharing models of how to do those investments, those future strategies, those policy and advocacy and community investments and involvement with Russell residents at the center. We wrote this pledge with R4R, the Russell for Russell Coalition, where we had met with them for weeks from October to March. We had all these conversations. We developed our knowledge and our shared learning spaces of how we want to engage in Russell in these developments. And then we wrote this pledge together, really bringing together our collective voice and our power. So if you look in the chat, we have a link to sign the pledge. If you are in solidarity with Russell or you are a Russell resident and you feel like, we need to have a collective voice, collective power, that investments in Russell as Russell is developing and revitalizing, how can we engage Russell residents in that part? Sign the pledge, read the full pledge within itself as it's been written with residents and with the staff of Russell Place of Promise. If you want to get more involved in the work that Russell Place of Promise is doing, we have some projects coming up. One is a work group of how we're going to engage with the 30th and Madison site and the future organizational form of RPOP as we hand it off to Russell residents to lead this work. The pledge is just that document, that tool, that guide that we're using as we're continuing to do this resident-driven work and how to do that in collectivism as we move forward. And so we'll drop that in the chat to sign the pledge. We have a goal of 200 residents to sign it. We're halfway there. We got 94 resident signatures and we have like 200, over 200 signatures in total. So if you are in solidarity in Russell, you have played in Russell, you went to church in Russell, you've been to the homecoming, you love Russell and you love the mayor of Russell, which is Ms. Jackie Floyd, then sign the pledge, read the pledge. It's a living document, so over time things will be shifted and changed as we do community work and things get shifted and changed. But we really want to make this difference and do this work together. So we encourage you to sign a pledge and read it and ask questions. And I believe that's it. If you have any questions, you can definitely leave those in the chat or email us. But this is some of the information about the pledge. And you'll see more information coming up over time on our website and on our social media.
Once again, I would like to thank everybody for being a part of Russell Place of Promise community conversation on reparations. And please sign up to follow us on our social media accounts. And have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.